Alright, this video is going to be all about checking on all the parts for your guitar, basically the first step to caring for your instrument. So first thing we're going to start off with is checking our strap joints right here, making sure they're not loose. If you feel any looseness, especially if you can move it with just your bare hand, then those are things that are going to be able to cause damage because you're putting a lot of weight, the weight of the guitar, sometimes the weight of your arms, on top of these two joints right here. And that is more than enough to strip the wood that is inside there or even bend the screws. And so you want those screws to be very tight. So if you ever feel any looseness, this is something to immediately fix. You don't want to let that go any longer than once you've noticed it. Don't let it go any longer than that. So you'll usually want some kind of screwdriver, to tighten that if you needed to tighten it. Mine are very tight. I just checked it earlier, so I know those are fine. Next, we can look at some of the hardware pieces on the guitar and check to make sure that all these screws are nice and tight. Right here. Boom. That need to be tightened a little bit. That one's good. Another one, and probably the biggest one that is loose, but we're going to have to change tools for this over to some kind of wrench or plier, is the input jack. This is probably the thing that I fix most often on guitars at School of Rock. If they're school guitars or if they're actually a student's personal guitar, this joint right here tends to get loose very often, and it's simply just because it's one of the most used pieces of the guitar. You're putting the jack in, you're pulling it out, putting it in, pulling it out, putting it in, pulling it out. You do that all day long, and this joint eventually is going to get loose. It happens. No matter how tight you tighten this, it is going to get loose on you. It's just a matter of time. So right here we can feel it. Mine's nice and tight. Once again, I did tighten this very recently. If this is loose, what we need to do is actually remove this plate. Right, we can remove the plate, unscrew it. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys. All right, take out one screw. Keep a baggie or a little cup. You can hear mine. I dropped in a little cup, so that way you don't lose your screws. The plate is now loose, and I can pull this out. We can also take a moment to check to make sure that the soldering joints on this are good. If they're getting loose, then you're going to want to have me or some kind of guitar tech solder those back on, or yourself if you're handy with the soldering iron. But especially if you're a young kid, don't be handling hot things. Have your parents do it. Have a guitar tech do it. Have someone who is responsible, for their health and safety do it. I don't want you guys being responsible for handling such a hot device. So once we have this out, if this is loose, now I can set this guitar down on my lap, and I can take the wrench, and I'm going to pull it up so that way you guys can see it. I'm going to hold the piece underneath tight with my hand, and then now I can tighten this and get it actually tight. Otherwise, if I tighten it from the top, most of the time it's just going to spin in my hand. What it's going to do is that's going to allow me to twist the wire inside of here, and then eventually these cords will just rip off. These little electrical cords will rip because you've spun it too much. So the much better way to do it is to pull off the plate and then tighten it. I'm going to take a little pause, put this back in. I'm going to come back to you guys. Alright, next thing we can check is the tightness of our little switch right here. Sometimes this will get loose right here. Sometimes the top piece will get loose. If either of those are loose, once again, you can tighten them by hand or use a wrench to tighten them. Now, moving on to the headstock, there are still parts on here that can get loose. You'll notice that there is a little bolt right here on the top of my tuning machine. Sometimes that'll need to be tightened. You can tighten that once again with a wrench. These are nice and tight. I didn't feel anything loose. Yours might be. Check them. Last thing to check is actually a little screw inside the center of my tuning machines. These adjust how stiff your tuning machine is. If you notice that your tuning machine is super loose or maybe even wobbly, this is the piece you need to adjust to get that going. If you make it super tight, you won't even be able to turn the tuning machine, right? Because you're clamping it all the way down. It's seizing up. So you don't want to be super tight, but you do want it to be tight enough that there's no looseness, right, allowing your string to slip or anything like that. Mine I just already checked, so I'm not going to check them again because I'll make the guitar out of tune. But those are numerous things to be checking on your guitar every single time you change your strings to make sure that your guitar is staying in proper working condition and that you're not letting anything get so far bad that now you need me to fix it because there's some damage that you can't fix, right? So those are a couple little things you can do to keep up with your guitar.